A roar echoed across the valley. Chains rattled, the ground trembled. A man, blind, broken, forgotten, stood between two pillars, his arms stretched wide. His lips whispered one final prayer. "Lord, remember me, just once more." And as he pushed, the pillars cracked, stone screamed, and the world of his enemies came crashing down. This is not just a story of strength, it's a story of redemption, of a man who lost everything, yet found God again in the ruins. This is the story of Samson. Long before the fall, there was a promise, a barren woman, a desperate prayer, and a voice from heaven that broke through the silence. "You will conceive a son. He will begin to deliver Israel from the hand of the Philistines." The woman trembled. Her husband, Manoah, looked to the sky. Could it be true? After years of waiting, they called him Samson, sunlight, because he was born to bring light into Israel's darkest days. From birth, Samson was set apart. No wine, no unclean food, and never to cut his hair. His strength wasn't just muscle, it was covenant, a promise between God and a man chosen to fight for his people. And as Samson grew, so did his power. The Spirit of God came upon him, and Samson tore a lion apart with his bare hands. The roar of the beast echoed across the wilderness, but the sound that remained was the whisper of destiny. He walked into enemy lands. He challenged entire armies. He struck down 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. The Philistines trembled when they heard his name, Samson, the unstoppable warrior of Israel. But behind every victory, pride grew. Behind every roar, a heart drifted, because the strongest man in the world was still weak in one place, his heart. One day, Samson saw a woman from Timnah, a Philistine, an enemy, but he said, "Get her for me. She pleases me well." His parents begged him to reconsider, but Samson's heart had already fallen. He wanted love, even if it meant walking into enemy territory. At the wedding feast, riddles and wine flowed. Samson posed a challenge. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. No one could solve it until they pressured his new wife. And she wept until he told her. Betrayal came wrapped in tears. The answer spread through the crowd, and Samson's rage exploded. He struck down 30 men to pay their wager. The marriage fell apart. The fire of anger consumed everything. Samson caught 300 foxes, tied torches to their tails, and set the Philistine fields ablaze. Golden flames painted the night sky. The land of the enemy burned, but so did Samson's soul. Every act of vengeance pulled him further from peace, further from the voice of the God who once guided him. And yet, even in his fury, God was still working, through chaos, through loss, through the ashes of pride. Because even when Samson lost control, he was still part of a divine plan. And then she appeared, Delilah. Her eyes shimmered like still water, her voice soft as honey, deadly as poison. The Philistine lords came to her and said, "Find out the secret of his strength, and will make you rich beyond measure." Delilah smiled, and Samson, blinded by affection, stepped willingly into her trap. Night after night she asked, "Tell me where your great strength lies." He teased her at first. "Bind me with new ropes. Braid my hair into 7 locks." Each time the Philistines attacked. Each time Samson broke free. But love can become a weapon when placed in the wrong hands. Delilah wept and said, "How can you say you love me when you hide your heart from me?" And Samson's resolve crumbled. The mighty man surrendered to a whisper. He told her everything. "Cut my hair, and I shall be weak like any other man." That night, while he slept on her lap, the razor gleamed in the darkness. The covenant was broken. The power was gone. When he awoke, the Philistines surrounded him. He rose to fight, but felt nothing. His strength was gone. They seized him, bound him, gouged out his eyes, and the man who once roared like a lion was led away like a lamb. The crowd cheered, trumpets blasted, and Samson, the once mighty warrior, stumbled in chains. The Philistines laughed. They paraded him through the city like a trophy, their champion blinded and broken. In the temple of Dagon, their god of stone, they shouted, "Our God has delivered Samson into our hands." Samson said nothing. He could no longer see the sun, but deep inside he could feel something greater than sunlight stirring again. Days turned into months. Chains bit into his wrists. He ground grain like a slave. A man who once tore lions apart now turned the mill of his enemies. And as he walked in endless circles, something began to change. The sound of the grinding wheel slowed. His breath steadied. His heart softened. And slowly, quietly, his hair began to grow again. There are moments in every life when God seems silent, when prayers echo back with no answer, when shame becomes a prison. For Samson, that silence was louder than chains. He had traded God's promise for a moment of pleasure. He had lost everything, his strength, his sight, his purpose, but even in the silence, God had not left him. Because grace is not destroyed by failure. It waits in the shadows, patient, merciful, unshaken. Samson couldn't see the dawn, but heaven was watching his every step. Sometimes God must let us fall, to show us that the ground beneath us is still mercy. One morning, the Philistines held a festival to honor their god, Dagon. Thousands filled the massive temple. Men, women, rulers, and warriors. The air was thick with laughter, wine, and pride. "Bring out Samson," they cried. "Let him entertain us." Guards dragged the blind man into the center of the hall. The crowd erupted in cruel delight. He stumbled forward, reaching out to a young boy beside him. "Place my hands on the pillars that hold up the temple," he whispered. The boy hesitated, but obeyed. Samson's fingers touched the cold stone. He felt the weight above him, the roof that held thousands. His heart pounded. The laughter around him faded, and for the first time in a long time, he prayed, "Lord God," his voice trembled, "remember me." Not the mighty Samson, not the warrior, just the man, blind, weak, repentant. "Please strengthen me one last time, so that I may bring down these pillars upon my enemies." It was not a cry for revenge. It was a cry for redemption, a plea from a man who finally understood that strength without God is nothing. And in that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him once more, not as thunder, but as peace, as power, as forgiveness. Samson's arms stretched wide, one hand on each pillar. Sweat dripped from his forehead. The room shook as he pushed. Stone groaned. The pillars began to crack. The laughter turned to screams. He pushed harder, every muscle, every breath, every ounce of his soul straining toward heaven, and he cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines." The temple collapsed. The roof split open like a wound in the earth. Thousands of Philistines perished, and Samson found peace. The man who had once fought for himself died fighting for his God. But that is not the end, because Samson's story was never about death. It was about what comes after failure, after shame, after silence. It was about grace, the kind that meets you when you're chained, the kind that whispers, "It's not over yet." Silence followed the fall. Dust filled the air. The mighty temple of Dagon lay in ruins. When the noise faded, the Philistines were gone. And in that silence, Samson's story reached heaven. His family came and took his body from the rubble. They buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol, the land where his story began. The sun set on his life, but his light didn't die. Because Samson's last breath wasn't defeat, it was deliverance. He had killed more in his death than in all his life, but more than that, he had found peace with God again. Samson's life is a mirror of our own, strong one day, stumbling the next, blessed one moment, broken the next. He had power, but he lacked purpose. He had gifts, but he lost sight of the giver. Yet when everything fell apart, when the world laughed at him, when he had nothing left to offer, that's when God's mercy found him. Maybe that's you today. Maybe you've failed. Maybe you've walked away from what you were called to do. Maybe the world has chained you with shame and regret. But Samson's story whispers this truth. God still remembers you. He still sees you, and your hair, your hope, can grow again. It doesn't matter what you've lost. It matters who still stands beside you in the ruins. The same God who gave Samson strength can give you the strength to rise again. Strength isn't found in muscles. It's found in surrender. Samson learned that the hard way that no amount of might can replace obedience. No victory can replace humility. But in his blindness, he finally saw what truly mattered. Not power, not pride, but purpose. He realized the greatest victory isn't over enemies, it's over yourself. When Samson's heart broke, heaven opened. When he lost everything, he found the one who never leaves. His story shows that God doesn't use perfect people. He uses the broken, the bruised, the forgotten, and turns their failure into fire. Because redemption isn't about what you've done. It's about what God can still do through you. As the last stone settled over Samson's grave, the wind carried a quiet promise, a story of hope that would echo through generations, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, God is not finished. Samson's light didn't die in that temple. It passed on, through prophets, through kings, until it reached the one who would come to save the world. Jesus, the true deliverer, the Redeemer who gave his life so that ours could begin again. Samson's arms once stretched wide between two pillars. Jesus' arms stretched wide on a cross. Both died to destroy the enemy, but only one rose again, to destroy death itself. And that is the greatest redemption ever told. So, when you feel lost, when your strength is gone, when the world calls you finished, remember Samson. Remember the God who turned his downfall into deliverance. And remember that your story isn't over yet. The same power that raised Samson's heart in his final breath, the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, still breathes in you. Let your failures become your foundation. Let your weakness become your worship. And let your story become someone else's hope. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Share it so someone else can find their strength again. Subscribe, because more stories of faith and redemption are waiting. And as you go, remember this. The world remembers Samson for his strength, but heaven remembers him for his surrender. Even the strongest fall. But those who fall into the hands of God always rise again. The story of Samson, the story of redemption, the story of grace. Fade out, music swells, the light breaks through the dust. The epic story of Samson, the greatest redemption ever told.